Hello and welcome to session 4, unit 1, learning outcome 4. We're looking at how to create a safe learning environment. And it kind of goes a bit back on to what we covered last week around preparing an inclusive scheme of work and your session plans. So let's get straight into this. We'll use the material that I've already created online as the basis for the discussion. So here, learning outcome 4 is be able to create and maintain a safe, inclusive teaching and learning environment. So there's quite a lot going on here. And as we go through the programme, we do end up on managing behaviour, so I'm not going to go into physical stuff too much at this point. But needless to say, we will look at breakaway techniques, diffusion techniques, and how you're able to maintain a safe environment regarding your personal space and well-being. So here we're going to look at physical safety. So this is the classroom environment. So obviously ensuring that we conduct risk assessments, emotional well-being, making sure that we manage stress and mental health, respect and diversity, ensuring that we are monitoring and evaluating that. Creating the positive classroom culture, which is the bit that Ofsted will see straight away. So they're the behaviours. Are your learners engaged? Are they asking questions? Do they have pen and paper handy? Promoting inclusion, so getting everyone involved, and again, providing feedback. Apologies for my sniffles and coughing and drinking. I've still got man flu, which, as anybody would know, is the worst type that you can get. So bear with me, I am soldiering on. So let's look at learning outcome 1. So explain why it's important to promote appropriate behaviour and respect for others. So we know within our classroom we've got British values, and in British values we're meant to be teaching democracy, rule of law, respect, mutual respect. But equally, there is this piece around managing behaviour. There's a great psychologist, doctor of education, who I'm looking at using some of her resources later on in your final modules, which is about managing behaviour. And it's one of the things that during an OTLA, you need to be seen to be controlling that environment. So the assertiveness that goes with it. But we know it's important to manage appropriate behaviour and respect of others because it optimises the learning environment. It's about mutual respect. So that's one of those British values that we should be embedded. The emotional well-being for yourself is critically important, but that of the well-being of others. So ensuring that kindness and consideration is being demonstrated throughout. Positive relationships, so that behaviour piece is what Ofsted's going to look for. So positive relationships and mutual respect for me in a learning environment are things such as turning up on time, sitting down quickly, getting your pen and paper out, bag on the floor, being engaged, putting your hand up, asking the questions, meeting deadlines. That's all things around positive relationships and creating that positive culture. So that can be quite a tricky one. Conflict resolution. So again, throughout the programme, the last part of this programme, I am going to teach you some control and restraint techniques around de-escalation, managing aggressive and challenging behaviour, and what happens if it does escalate to a point where your safety is compromised. So we'll talk about that because it's important as a teacher that you're able to have those strategies and feel in control. I'm hoping you never have to use them. Touch wood, he says. But if you do have to use them, you should know how to break away. You should know how to get out of being in an intimidated environment. Looking at then social and civil responsibilities, so just making sure that you're providing that culture and communicating clearly. Modelling behaviour, so again, be mindful of psychology when we're teaching, so that transfer, counter-transfer, and that modelling. And that can happen quite quickly, where if we start to pick our voice up, the student starts to pick up their voice, and then obviously that can cause a real negative impact. So we know why it's important for all the obvious reasons, to promote a safe environment. Maslow's hierarchy of needs clearly says unless we're in a safe environment, we're not going to learn, right? But from an Ofsted point, they want to see a safe environment. And that safe environment is the physical environment, the mental and well-being environment, and how you manage those behaviours. And if you Google and you do a bit of research on this, you can find the behaviours in which Ofsted expect to be seen within a classroom. So ways of promoting equality and diversity within your role is obviously inclusive curriculum. So last week, we looked at differentiation, we looked at embedding different cultures and responsibilities, we looked at kind of sharing best practice, we did all of that stuff. So again, when we create curriculum, just making sure that we've got that differentiation in there, looking for natural opportunities to embed. And like we said, it isn't a must every time, it is as and when it is appropriate. Looking at your resources, being able to open and facilitate open discussions. So if you haven't done your speaking and listening level 2, which you think you have to have done to be on this program anyway, but if you haven't done it, I do cover open discussions on my functional skills module. So if you have a look at that, you'll see the different questioning techniques that we use throughout. So the open, the expanded, the filtering, etc. Acknowledgement, celebrating cultural events and holidays. So I normally do a hot topic once a week, and in my hot topic, it's a random subject. We just start talking about it and we look at that. And there's other things that are about role modelling, looking at biasness, celebrating diversity, and your own professional development. So when we look at ways of exploring equality and diversity, we need to just think about how we embed that through our normal curriculum process as well. 4.3 looks at sustaining that safe and inclusive learning environment. And this really is you as a teacher setting those boundaries and that safe and inclusive environment from the word go. So clear expectations and what you are going to accept as normal behaviour. So I have walked into classrooms, as I am sure you have, when you've got people chatting to each other, when you've got people using their phones under the table. And it is very clear that when you are in that room, they have not had a teacher lead them. And part of our role is to set that assertiveness, those boundaries, to accept tolerance at the very beginning and that mutual respect. So to set those clear expectations of behaviour at the beginning is really important, but equally what I tend to say to my group is, let's look at consequences for this, because that's part of British values, which is democracy and rule of law. So we can look at what we expect to happen if people don't participate or engage correctly. Equally, we talk a little bit about setting those rules and those active listening skills and giving people time to talk and time to respond. And that creates a sense of shared responsibility for a positive atmosphere. So that is absolutely down to you to create those boundaries at the beginning. We want to have a positive teacher and student relationship, but again, within boundaries. We want to make sure we're building strong relationships, and again, based on trust and mutual respect. The reality is there seems to be this whole thing that we have to be this person that gives it out first to all the students, but ultimately I kind of explain, well, I'm here, I'm ready, I'm prepared. That is me giving you mutual respect. I now expect you to do that back. So obviously it is about you being prepared for your lessons. It is about you having the right resources. It's about you having the right curriculum that's stimulating and challenging. Student-centered learning. So this goes back to ensuring we've looked at equality and diversity, we've looked at reasonable adjustments, we've looked at differentiation, we've looked at purpose, pace and progress. And ultimately creating that lesson around that individual is fundamentally important. but picking the right assessment methods for that individual makes it student-centered learning. And it means that the learner then is in the driving seat. And as far as I'm concerned, from going back from as early year 2000 when I became an EQA, I would expect level 3 and above it to be learner-led, not tutor and assessor-led. And I kind of looked at the way of assessment being, here's your resources, but I now expect you to take responsibility for it. And again, what you'll see what I've done in this curriculum, I give everything up front, because that's student-centered learning. That's me going, look, here's everything that you need to empower you. Let's do this. And my master's that I'm currently doing at the moment, and it's my second master's, they've done it exactly the same way. They open the whole module up, the whole lessons. So it's kind of led for me to guide my way through that. And again, we kind of expect that from A level and above. People should be able to plan and prepare themselves. So I spend more time talking about, look, this is the assignment, this is what we need to do, this is how we need to do it. And then, for example, then developing teaching and learning resources, such as online learning, VLEs, recordings, because that's what creates that student-led piece, because we do not work in a one-hat-fits-all scenario. And that's the one bit about the jigsaw of Ofsted I always find quite difficult in adult education, which is we work in high-pressured environments, but then we pull you all through like a herd of sheep. Yet what we're saying at the very beginning is be inclusive, be personal-centered, use differentiation, but you must all attend this lesson at this time and learn it in the same way. It's the one thing that I've never got my head around. So, you know, answers on a postcard for that one. Because I just think learning is such an individual thing. And for me, my learning style is very much an activist. I am very much a hands-on learner. If I put my hands to it and I've become experiential, I've given it a go and I've reflected, it'll stick. I can quite honestly say 95% of all the essay or the lectures that I've gone through, I may retain tiny bits, but nowhere near the proportion as what I would as vocational and hands-on. So it's a real difficult one, because 95% of the people, arguably, that do our qualifications, that attend our curriculums, want to attend because they are vocational. But anyway, I digress. But think about how you can have vocational learning at the centre of what it is you're doing, because that's the bit we don't want to lose. That then puts you into inclusive teaching practices. Absolutely recognising, adapting and accommodating those needs are really important. Adapting your curriculum, adapting your lesson plans, adapting your PowerPoints and adapting your teaching and resources. Remember what we said last week, flexibility, flexibility, flexibility. Collaboration, co-production. So again, collecting that feedback from the students, what went well, what didn't work well, what do we think we could do differently next time, is great, because you tend to give them a bit of ownership on the curriculum. And ownership on the curriculum allows them to feel that it's learner-led. Respect their diversity, create that safe physical environment, you know, making sure that the classroom's set up, making sure that you've done your risk assessments and everything's ready and your emergency protocols are in place, people know what to do in the event of a fire. Emotional wellbeing and pastoral support. So again, in the apprenticeships that we deliver, we do a wellbeing and welfare module. It's important people know that they can feel that they can talk, feel not, you know, feel that they can be heard and listened to and respected. The last thing we want is one of our students feeling that we're the tipping point on top of a lot of work. And especially if you're teaching apprenticeships, you know, let's not forget they're probably working full-time jobs, full-time study, full-time life and commitment. And us just keep going at them. Oh, I need this assignment, I need this, I need this, I need this. We potentially can become that tipping point for their mental health. And none of us want to cause harm. It's a complete ethical thing we want to avoid. But equally, we need to maintain professionalism, boundaries, and fair assessments. So fair assessment is deadlines and commitment. However, there are reasonable adjustments. So just being flexible with some of those and being a bit more flexibility in your thinking. You know, if we look at recruitment and retention, I think I saw the education minister the other day saying, I don't understand why we have 100% targets for people not dropping out on apprenticeships. Why would you drop out? You've got this free funding. Why are people dropping out? Well, because there's no flexibility. And the irony here is that lack of flexibility comes from the government in some ways. It comes from this 20% off the job. It comes from this year in a day. It comes from these ridiculous rules that came out of the education framework. However, it is down to us to fight and advocate for certain people, to look at those reasonable adjustments, to see how we can tailor that to meet their needs. And we did that during the pandemic. So we know we are able to do it. We just need to be much stronger in our argument and justifications. Regular reflection and improvements, anti-bullying and discrimination policies. You know, touch wood, I have to say, in all the years that I've been doing this, I very rarely see it in adult learning, because we're all just at that point where we're just like, oh, come on, please, really. However, if we did see it, we call it out. We stand on that straight away, and we're not going to allow anyone in our class to be bullied as a teacher. And then community engagement. So just involving everyone else in the curriculum so they understand that role and effect. So looking then at the assignment for this, nice and simple then. Short written answers, promoting respectful, inclusive learning environment, explain why it's important to promote behaviours and respect for others, explain ways to promote equality and diversity, and establish and sustain safe, inclusive learning environments. So, learning outcome 5, be able to deliver inclusive teaching and learning. So the first thing here is we need to understand differentiation. We need to understand the diverse backgrounds and the curriculum. We need to have flexibility in our assessment strategies. We've already talked about this. You can see this repetition now coming through, repeat, repeat, repeat. We need to look at universal design for learning. So we need to look at the assessment cycle and the teaching cycle. We need to think about our collaboration. We need to have clear communication, so clear instructions, expectations, materials, easy to understand. We need to have our classroom management, so those boundaries. So again, that's our last module. We need to build on those relationships, be a reflective practitioner, and think about our professional development. So we're going to do that by 5.1, analysing the effectiveness of teaching and learning approaches within our own specialism, relation to meeting the individual needs of learners. So this is about you understanding your sector and the barriers and the boundaries that your sector faces. So for example, if you are in health and social care, some of the barriers are around levels of English, the physicality of the job. They become barriers, and then just getting time to study. If you're in IT and digital, you may find things around concentration or eye strain and long periods of working on PCs to be a problem. But ultimately, understanding your barriers will help you create a more inclusive approach. So, for example, when I deliver a health and social care session, I have lots of let's get up and move our bodies because I know people get stiff. I do lots of mini activities to keep the brain stimulated. So it's a case of you creating that high energy, high impact. And if you're doing something like coding or something that's quite eye straining, tappy, 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 think about how you can shake that up to be a bit more inclusive, and checking that everybody in that group is learning. So I've done many Ofsted inspections. I've done lots of joint OTLAs with Ofsted. One of the things that the Ofsted inspector will ask or look at is, did every single person in that room learn? That's what inclusive learning means. Everybody has learned something. And how can you recognise that everyone has learned something? Well, you need to understand the assessment of learning needs. So you need to understand their learning styles, and your teaching styles need to match that. And I know we keep going on about it, but it's so important to make sure that you have the visual, the auditory, and things there for the kinesthetic learner. So you are using that whole range all the time. It needs to be in your scheme of work. It needs to be in your session plans. And you need to think about, if we're doing blocks of learning for more than 40 minutes, our brain's switching off anyway. So how are we breaking that down? Micro learning is the way that we should be going forward. We need to show that to evaluation within our own area of specialism. So how are you keeping up to date with your areas of specialism? Who's reviewing your curriculum? So it's okay having a curriculum lead for the whole, you know, a director for learning and development. That's absolutely great. I highly recommend that, because somebody has to manage it. But then who is giving that curriculum lead governance over your curriculum? So thinking about how we're using the IQA process outside the scope of assessment. So again, that quality assurance around curriculum design, inclusion, writing those schemes of work and session plans. Reflecting on and customizing instructions for student profiles. So if you do have students that have got ADHD, so let's say they lack focus, I would be doing short burst activities, probably a bit more visual, bit more auditory, bit more role play, because again, they can burn off that energy and focus in that way. Again, managing student engagement, so thinking about how you're going to use that 360 approach feedback. One of the things that I do that I quite like to do a lot in classes is I get the students to do something, I get them to reflect on how they did. So the very simple phrases, you know, that was really great, tell me how do you think you did, what do you think your strengths are, what do you think your weaknesses were, and then I would get the group to give feedback as well. So people can hear this 360 approach and get used to positive and negative. Outcome and achievement, so looking at those outcomes and examining those and making sure that we've achieved them, being flexible and adaptable, using inclusive assessment strategies, so thinking about the different strategies which we're going to use, which we spoke about in week 1 or 2, where we say, well, okay, we've got 2 groups of learners, we've got this faster group, we've got this newer intermediate group. Let's get this intermediate group working on the standard, let's get those that can aim higher, aiming higher, and then let's bring that together so we're sharing best practice, so we're not holding people back and we're not making people feel stupid. So we're keeping things as they should be. Again, with those learning resources, always have a plan B, always have a bit of contingency there, always have something that you're able to throw in, and consider that those resources that you're doing meet those learning styles and those different styles. So, you know, I always think a group discussion works really well there. You know, let's look at this piece of legislation. I want one of you to do a bit of research, one of you to do a presentation, one of you to do a drawing, whatever it is. But as a group, work together and try and get that learning style going. And again, think about your own professional development there. When we look at the benefits of the limitations of communication methods and media use in our area of specialism, so there's positives and negatives for everything. If we use visual aids, the positives there is it enhances what we're trying to say. It makes it clearer to the learner. It can help memory and retention, so they're the benefits. But the limitations there, so the limitations may be it doesn't really help convey complex ideas. It can depend on the quality of the diagram or the clarity of the presentation, and it may not suit all learning styles. So here, when we do an analyze, we do the benefits and we do the limitations, and then we draw our conclusions. So visual aids are great in some ways, not necessarily in others. Written materials, again, handbooks and textbooks, benefits, in-depth, they can review at the person's pace. They can help with study revision. But again, if there's disabilities, they become a barrier. They could be quite intimidated. They could feel, there could be loss, a lack of clarification. And it can feel quite linear. It can feel quite formal ways of learning. So again, it could be quite intimidating for some learners. Verbal communication. So again, what I'm doing here is lectures. So the benefits of me lecturing is I can just get it out there. I can say, well, look, here's a lot of information, bang. Again, because we're recording them, you can go back and play them. You can watch it at your own pace. If there are things that I've said, you can record it and play it back. So let's see, if you said this, I'm really not sure what you meant. So they're the benefits of lectures. The downside to lectures are, if you have neurodivergent people, they could switch off. It's no fun listening to somebody for an hour. So trying to make them high energy and relevant, or at least bite sizes where you need to be. Multimedia presentations, again, great for getting it off to kind of that present over to the visual learner. It can appeal to different learning styles, and you're able to use real world ideas. The limitations there, though, it can be overstimulating, especially for someone with autism. It can be overused. It can be, you lose the storytelling in teaching. You lose that connection, that interpersonal bit. And it depends on the quality of them. And then obviously interactive technology then obviously promotes learning, improves digital skills, creates or it can do a controlled learning environment. And it can offer immediate feedback. The downsides to that are it requires digital understanding and proficiency. You need stable internet connections, and it may not fully replicate real world experiences. So when you create your curriculum, when you do your intent, you can justify, so you can do the pros and cons there. So we need to then analyze the effectiveness of each of those resources in our specialist area. So here we're looking at resources aligned to learning outcomes. So again, we can create things like a PowerPoint or a presentation or a handout directly to meet learning outcomes. So pretty much like what I've done. You've got PowerPoints there, you've got workbooks there, you've got this written text, and you've got these videos. It's direct to learning outcomes. Accessibility and inclusivity. So here, let's just say I want you to read all of this, or you have trouble reading that. You can click up here on your extension, go to read aloud.
Analyzing the effectiveness of resources used in one's area of specialism is crucial for ensuring that instructional materials cater to the diverse needs of learners.
So again, you can download easy-to-use plugins. Now, if you're not a fan of plugins or you've never used them before, I do a digital skills range in my YouTube channel. So if you look at digital skills, there's one called text to reading. It's a plugin on Chrome. You just download it and you can do that. So straight away, you can make online material inclusive. So if you've got dyslexia, not a problem. If you're visually impaired, not a problem. This can read it for you. So again, just thinking, and again, that will improve their functional skills reading because they can follow that and it highlights it. Again, sizing. Obviously, you can push your control and plus button, control and minus buttons. So sizing, no problem. It's down to us, though, to show the learner how to use accessibility. So as I said, every week I'm producing part of my digital skills tips on how to create an inclusive environment using digital technology. So the one that I did this week, as I said, was read aloud text to speech. It's a simple plugin, and that works perfect. Again, for motivation, it empowers people. It's that whole fish and rod thing, isn't it? If I give you a fish, I'll feed you for a day, give you a rod, feed you for life. That's what this does. And for me, being dyslexic, the moment I had text to speech and speech to text, there was no excuse for me not to thrive, because the barrier that was stopping me, I've now got a way of overcoming it. Again, flexibility, adaptability. I don't know how flexible and adaptable we need to be on this one now. We've got AI assisted software there. So things like Grammarly, the learner can write it. You can do speech to text. I've already done that as a training thing in Google. Loads of, pop it into Grammarly, it tidies it up. It can read it back to you. There's just no excuse really, not now. So that's the use of technology. And again, just think about your feedback. So the effectiveness of resources, we have unlimited resources now, unlimited resources. We just don't use them in education properly. And that's because the teachers do not understand how to use the resources themselves. If you understood how to use the resources, you would be using them. So for example, in a Word document, it does referencing. Do you know how to use it? You can do your mail merges, whatever. There's just so much stuff that can be done. It's really important that we learn to use the resources correctly so we're able to move it forward. 5.4 looks at using inclusive teaching approaches and resources, including technology, to meet the individual needs of the learners. So again, it kind of feels like we're going around the same thing here. But again, it is the case of adapting those strategies. Now, if you've never used ChatGPT before, you can just simply go in here and go, as a teacher, how can I support someone who is unable to read in class? There you go. And then it will give you that. Or what you could do is, please write me a support plan for Stephen Davis. He is a full-time man who finds it hard to put pen to paper. Help with essay writing. There you go, and there's your support plan. So ultimately, we now have so many resources as teachers to help us overcome obstacles that we never had before. You've got interventions, you've got strategies. So it's just the case of pushing your boundaries, just using them to identify them. And again, you will create a far more inclusive environment. So I don't think there's any excuses now. There's absolutely no excuses now. So there's a lot on there. A lot of this starts to repeat itself at this level. So just be mindful of that. And again, demonstrate ways to promote equality and diversity in your own teaching. So when I carry out the observations of teaching, I will observe your scheme of work, I will observe your lesson plan, I will observe your resources. That will show me if it's been inclusive. I will want to see that the language that you're using is relevant to the group. I will observe a variety of methods. When I watch the videos, I can see the flexibility in the grouping. I can see how people respond. So for 5.5, demonstrate ways to promote equality and diversity in your own areas of teaching. This is me observing you as a teacher. So that when you look at your observation of teacher learning checklist, the OTLAs, this is on there. So just think about how you can embed that within your session. Again, celebrating cultural differences, using open dialogues, trying to have those discussions, making sure that you get reflective practice in there as well. 5.6, again, is going to be covered through the observational teaching and learning, which is about adapting your teaching and learning approaches and resources and technology to meet the individual needs. So when I observe your session, I just want to see how everyone is being included. So that might be the fact that you do e-portfolio, VAE learning, you might get them to use their phone apps, you can get them to use digital technology, you can get them to use AI, you can get them to use Grammarly, you can get them to use text to speech or speech to text, depending on which way around you need it. So just think about how you're going to adapt it. Think about the differentiation. So if you are teaching, it would be great for me to see how you group work with a group that needs a bit more support than a group that doesn't. Or again, maybe in your group you've got different techniques that you're going to use, such as the scaffolding technique, where you could small on steps and just build it up, or whatever it is. You may want to show me ILPs, your individual learning plans. So very much like what we've just done there, that was a learning plan. And then again, flipped classroom model, assign pre-recorded lectures. So very much what we've done, get people to do reading before the class. And again, that helps facilitate that class along. Feedback, reflective practice sessions. So all of that I will observe. So they're things that you need to be doing. 5.7, communicate with learners. So again, I need to observe this. This will be in your observation of teaching and learning. I want to see how you've got open lines of communication. I need to make sure that you're communicating with everybody fairly. I want to see regular progress checking with every single learner in that group. So how are you checking the inclusion, making sure that everyone is progressing? Problem sharing, use of technology again. That may be your e-portfolios or VLEs or whatever it is you're doing. Collaboration there, and then obviously empower with learners and monitoring, tracking progress. So that's all of the stuff that I need to observe during your observation. So 5.1 to 5.3, you've got a short essay to write. The rest will obviously be observed. So 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, tell me how you analyze teaching and learning approaches, unpacking the communication methods and media, and how you evaluate those resources. And the observation requirements, as I've already said, 5.4, 5, 6, and 7 are going to be observed through the OTLA. So make sure you have understood the observation, teaching, and learning requirements. So, learning outcome 6, be able to assess learning in education and training. If you've done your Assessors Award, you should fly through this. And again, above, I have given you, in my old NVQ work, I have given you work there to think about. So, thinking about how you plan, collect, judge, and feedback. So, 6.1, you need to explain the purpose, the types of assessment methods in education training, analyse their effectiveness, use types of assessments. So again, this is on your assessment plans. You're going to see that. I'm going to sneeze, bear with me. Let me just pause. How you use questioning, internal and external requirements, and then communicate those to learners. So this module, or this block of learning, very much is like the Assessors Award. It's just condensed into a very short block. So explain the purpose and use of assessment in education and training. Well, the purpose of assessment is to track progress, right? It's just see, has learning taken place and was it effective? So purpose of assessments is to measure outcomes, feedback and improvements, monitor progress, motivate and engage, and quality assure. And then the types of assessments are your formative assessments. So that's that ongoing piece. And then the summative at the end. The diagnostic assessments at the beginning to help shape stuff. And then you've got some other types there. So kind of self-assessment, peer assessment, etc. Looking at the effectiveness of assessment methods. So analysing the different types of assessment methods to meet individual needs. So we've got lots of different types of assessment methods to meet needs of individual learners. And again, it's just looking at the assessment criteria, those learning outcomes, to see how that all pieces together. But again, thinking about your differentiation, your individual learning, your any disabilities or special needs there. Think about your performance-based evidence, self-reflection, tailored feedback, flexibility, inclusive teaching, and individual goals. But what we're saying here is when we think about the assessment methods in relation to meeting the needs of the learners, how are we going to assess the learner? And that's very much, if we go back to our kind of old standard practices, which is if it says describe, if it says explain, that's knowledge. If it says demonstrate, that's performance. So knowledge evidence, the assessment methods there are going to be knowledge evidence methods, exams, multiple choice, written essays. And the problem now is with AI coming through, we have a lot of questions around validity there. And then on performance evidence, we need to think about how we use our performance evidence there. And I highly recommend, if you are becoming a teacher, it's definitely worthwhile looking at Anne Gravel's assessment principles and methodologies and her IQA process. But you'll be doing the IQA process as a module later on if you haven't done your IQA award anyway. Using types of assessment methods, including peer self-assessment to involve learners. So again, looking then at their reliability, valid, safe, authentic. So looking at those types of methods, so such as your observations, your professional discussions, your witness statements, etc. It's very difficult now to ensure in today's modern technology that it is valid, reliable, sufficient, and authentic. And most of the problems that came out of Ofsted reports last year was about plagiarism. So the only way that you are going to ensure that the work is reliable and that of the learners is through discussion and validation. And it kind of gives even more validation now to endpoint assessment, which is a completely independent check on skills. So the methods should involve the learner in the assessment process, because ultimately, when I work with my students, I tend to say to them, how do you want to do this? And granted, at level 5, there's a lot of formal writing to be done. But through the observation, through the professional discussions, we're going to get more evidence out of this. Mixing individual needs, so kind of, that's a great piece of evidence. Why did you do that? How did you do that? Looking at their different styles and bringing it together can be really helpful. Producing valid and reliable evidence, so just thinking about how you're going to check it, and then obviously checking those goals and giving feedback is really important. 6.4, sorry, looks at questioning. So questioning then is really going to be the only way that you can check validity of evidence. And this happened to me recently, actually, in one of my master programs. The tutor had concerns over the validity of one of my assignments. She phoned me and said, look, Steve, before we can release the grade, I need to verify this work is yours. I said, not a problem, let's talk about it. So she gave me some questions, I answered them. She said, you wrote this, can you explain that? You wrote that, can you explain that? What did you mean by this? And obviously that then gave her the assurance that the work was valid and it was mine, and that I understood the content of the assignment. So that's a way that where questioning can really contribute to the assessment process. And again, sometimes when you question learners, you always set them up for a professional discussion, so you can gather the evidence and you can use questioning and feedback to promote critical thinking, to promote self-reflection, to promote this self-esteem and all of this stuff. So it's a great way of learners understanding that question and feedback should be used for a continual quality improvement process. So just constantly questioning themselves, I've done this, why have I done this, what was the benefit of it, etc. Recording the outcomes of assessment to meet internal and external requirements. So internal requirements is your IQA process and making sure you understand that, and external is your external quality assurance process. And remember, your external quality assurance process is your IQA, is your awarding organisation process, plus Ofsted or the ESFA. So internal requirements then, you're going to be looking at your progress tracking, feedback documentation, curriculum and accountability. And external is going to be your external quality assurance, so that's your accrediting bodies, accreditation standards, and again, thinking about your transparency of record keeping data, evidence recording, and quality improvement. So lessons learned at the end of everything. So the assessment method here You've got 2 short written questions. One, explain the purpose and types of assessments used in education and training. And 2, analyse the effectiveness of those methods. And then observation requirements. I obviously need to see through the observations how you use those methods, so how you involve them, how you plan for them, how you meet the needs, and how they're valid, reliable, sufficient, authentic, and how they meet the IQA internal and external process, and then how you use questioning, record those outcomes, and communicate assessment information. So plan, collect, judge, feedback, right? That's all we're after there. Nothing too terrible. So number 7 then looks at planning for the minimum core through the planning and delivery of inclusive learning. Your minimum core looks at literacy, numeracy, digital and inclusive approach and assessment. So thinking about how you apply the minimum core throughout. So 7.1 looks at ways of analysing in which minimum core can be demonstrated in planning and delivery inclusive learning. So this is about those your minimum core through your delivery plan, your session plan, your materials and resources, clear objectives, clear material, practical application, and digital integration. So using digital technology throughout. Delivered inclusive curriculum, teaching and learning, again, clear communication, multimedia and adaptations of differentiation, and again for assessing that mix of written, oral, practical assessment methods, feedback, digital assessment, and reflective practice. Your digital core as well, applying this through planning inclusive teaching and learning. You're looking at planning inclusive teaching and learning with clear learning objectives. You're looking at those diverse resources around literacy and numeracy, looking at how you embed numeracy skills and digital enablement through that, looking at your inclusive learning techniques for that, and again, looking at the literacy proficiency, so how you're embedding this throughout. So even though people may not be doing functional skills, the minimum core is a requirement in curriculum regardless. So we should be embedding numeracy, literacy, and digital skills as standard in our curriculum to promote the national minimum core. That's for yourself and that is for your learners. So when you mark work, are you also marking the literacy and numeracy skills alongside that? Now, here's the thing. The awarding organisation doesn't require you to have English, perfect English to pass an assessment criteria. If it's not an assessment criteria, you can't include it. Ofsted, on the other hand, would like to see you marking grammatical errors, didn't even say that right, but anyway, you know what I mean. So spelling, punctuation, and grammar. They would like to see that you are correct at minimum core because that's how you improve those skills. From an awarded organisation point, not necessarily a requirement unless it says it in the curriculum, but from a government funded point, you should be doing it because it is a minimum core in teaching and learning. So just then bringing unit 1 to an end. It feels like we've been on this unit for a long time, but it's only been a month. We're looking at then a question to cover analyse a minimum core in teaching and learning for planning, delivery and assessment. And in the observation for the material and everything you submit to me, I need to see how you have embedded your minimum core in planning, delivery and assessment. And unfortunately, if I do not see the minimum core in what you submit, it is a refer because it doesn't meet the national standards for minimum core. So finally, learning outcome 8, being able to evaluate own practice, planning, delivery, inclusive teaching and learning. Here you should be able to evaluate your own practice, so carry out self-reflection, feedback, analysis, learning opportunities, inclusive learning impact, and learner impact is important for purpose, pace and progress, professional development, your evidence-based, collaboration, goal setting, continual quality improvement. So 8.1 looks at how you carry out reviewing the effectiveness of your own practice. So at the end of your own scheme to work and session plans, are you reflecting on them? Are you carrying out a reflective log? Are you collecting feedback? Do you get feedback from others? Are you analysing this? Are you setting goals? Are you on a continual quality improvement cycle? Are you balancing and challenging things, thinking of ethical considerations and thinking about further changes to your curriculum? 8.2 looks at identifying areas for improvement, so that constant using that reflective cycle. So whether you're using Gibbs or whether you're using Ralph or wherever whatever you're using as your reflective cycle, can you show that? Are you coming up with a quality improvement plan for your curriculum and a self-assessment report? So again, showing reflection, showing feedback, showing that the outcomes have been met, collecting peer feedback, observations, adapting to meet learning needs, and meeting those requirements for equality and diversity. And then 1.8 then looks at the 5R framework for reflection, reporting, responding, relating, reasoning, and looking at your own practice and planning your future actions. So it's entirely up to you what model you look at. So again, here, I'll let you go through this at your own pace. But that's the 5 R's, if that's a model that you want to use. I personally use Ralph or Gibbs. You've got the Cole framework, so content, action, results, and learning. So if you want to use Cole for a reflection framework. So again, just thinking about, you've only got to pick one model, by the way. You don't have to pick 3 or 4, but you need to pick one model and become proficient in this as a reflective practitioner throughout. So if Ofsted said to you, what reflective model do you use? You can pick one. Okay, so that's Cole. So you've got the 5 R's, you've got Cole. You've got the 4 F's, facts, feelings, findings, future. So again, same thing, just go through that. Here's one that I particularly like. So I like Gibbs. Gibbs reflective cycle. So what happened, your feelings, the evaluation, the analysis, the conclusion and action plan. Again, just run through this, make sure you understand it. It works well. Some have their strengths and limitations. And then Ralph, so what now, what, who, what? I think it's Ralph. Keep saying Ralph. I'm sure it's Ralph. Yeah, Ralph. Estelle. So again, this one I think works really well if you want something quick. So what went on? So what now? Now what in the future? Great. So what happened? What went wrong? And what are you going to do about it? Again, for and against on those, and you've got kind of your extended reading there to have a review. So think about different reflective cycles. You need to pick one that you're going to use throughout, and then you also need to look at that throughout. And again, you've got the integrated reflective cycle as well. So experience, the reflection, the theory, and the practitioner. So task 8 then looks at reflective practice process. You need to use one framework and then obviously go through that framework and evaluate your curriculum. And then you're going to use that continuous. Whatever one you pick, I want you to become proficient in it. So by the end of this program, you should be using a reflective framework as a consciously competent person. So it's almost task orientated. You're there by the end of it. Wonderful. And then we move on to Unit 2, being able to look at your own practice in areas of specialism. So let's just have a look. We have now covered teaching, learning, assessment, and education and training. We've covered understanding roles and responsibilities in week 1. We looked at summarising key aspects of legislation, equality, diversity, reasonable adjustments, access to assessments and all of that. Well, we looked at being able to use diagnostic tools, so we looked at pre-screening, we looked at different types of diagnostic tools, Honey and Mumford, Caleb's, and all of that jazz. L3, we looked at being able to plan an inclusive session. So this is the start of your journey, looking at schemes of work, looking at lesson plans, looking at how to plan, looking at how to give feedback and judgment. And again, you've uploaded that for me to get your baseline in, and hopefully you've uploaded a video for me to have a look at for teaching and learning so I can see where you're starting at. And then we've gone through module 4, being able to create a safe environment, 5, being able to deliver inclusive environment, 6, being able to assess learning, 7, being able to look at that minimum core English, maths and digital skills, and then 8, we've looked at reflective frameworks. So I would like you now to complete Unit 1, submit all your work so we can then move on to Unit 2. And next week, we're going to be looking at being able to investigate practice in your own areas of specialisms. And again, it's a reasonably big unit, so we'll probably take a couple of weeks to get through that unit. As I said, as you go through, you can see you've got your IQA practices there that we were talking about earlier. And I said earlier that we would look at managing behaviour in that learning environment, and there it is, it's there. So hopefully you found that useful. I'm pleased to say that's the end of Unit 1, and I look forward to introducing you to Unit 2. Take care, bye for now, and I wish you all best of luck.